This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. When I am recording this, it is election night. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy, healthy, and hopefully safe tonight when you're listening to this, or if you're listening to the next day or something like that after the results are already known, or if they're continuing to be counted. I hope everyone is just safe, happy, and healthy regardless of the outcome. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already on whatever podcasting app or website you're listening to this on. If you're on Spotify, if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you're on Podbean, if you're on pretty much any website or application you're listening to this episode on, please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. We would really appreciate it if you would do so, as well as leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general. That would be awesome. It would let us know that you guys are enjoying the discussion points, the topics that we're talking about here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. So again, we would appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast. Again, you want to subscribe so you get those alerts and notifications, and you can know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast here at the GSMC Sports Podcast team. Whenever we release it, you'll get that notification, and you can be one of the first people to listen to a new episode when we release it. And again, you also want to leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general. That would really appreciate us and give us a big boost of confidence, as well as let us know, again, you're enjoying sort of the topics and discussion points. And finally, don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms as well. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over on social media, we just love to interact with you guys more. So if you want to come over and talk about sports, talk about the show, talk about any points that I've made, or if you want to disagree with me and go back and forth, I'm totally down to do that as well. Again, on social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. We'd love to interact with you guys more on there, just in general. Again, I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. We have a fantastic show for you all today. Later on in the episode, I didn't know how much NBA I was going to talk. The NBA rumors have been kind of dead. That is until today. Of course, the vote is coming up. Reports are saying as soon as Thursday for whether the NBA season will start on December 22nd or will it be closer to the January 18th date that players want. It appears that players would like the season to start, somewhere in January to get some more rest on their bodies, specifically from those teams that did qualify for the bubble and teams like the Lakers and the Heat that were there for, months at a time and really their season just ended. Or will the owners get their way and kind of start on December 22nd with training camp opening December 1st, meaning if that vote is passed by December 1st, we'll already have the free agency and the draft, meaning trades and free agents could happen soon. And there was a rumor that James Harden could be on the move via trade, and so could Giannis Antetokounmpo potentially. I saw both those rumors via The Athletic and on Twitter. I want to talk about those at the very end of the episode. So again, at the very end of the episode, I'll be giving you everything NBA rumors, specifically from James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Could they be on the move sooner rather than later? That's something we'll talk about at the very end of the episode. And of course, the rest of the episode is going to be dominated by the National Football League. Today was also the trading deadline. No major moves were made. Only 2 moves were made really on the trading deadline day. Of course, we saw Quan Alexander get traded yesterday on Monday, and we also saw that Chargers cornerback get traded as well. Desmond King, who's a former All-Pro. Of course, Yannick Ngakoue last week as well. So there was a couple of moves in return, during the trading season. But on the actual deadline day today, there was really nothing. Isaiah Ford was traded from the Miami Dolphins to the New England Patriots for a conditional 7th-round pick. And I don't know at the time of the recording exactly what the compensation is for Miami for their other trade that they made, which was for running back DeAndre Washington from the Kansas City Chiefs. He was okay in Oakland. now Las Vegas, then moved to Kansas City, kind of got buried on that depth chart with a stacked, running back room which used to consist of Damian Williams before he opted out, and obviously now Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. I think it's another 7th-round pick, maybe that same pick that they got for Isaiah Ford getting sent over to Kansas City. So again, those were the only 2 major deadline moves, and I mentioned Miami because, of course, I want to start off with the Miami Dolphins today. Now, usually the Miami Dolphins the past, 20 or so years have never been the leading topic on any sports podcast, any sports talk radio that isn't in Miami. But of course, last Sunday was Tua Tagovailoa's debut. And I think that is the main takeaway that I have from NFL Sunday. Again, there were so many good games that I want to talk about. I do want to talk about Pittsburgh-Baltimore. I want to talk about Green Bay not getting a wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers. What does that mean? I want to talk about the New England Patriots season practically being over. I also want to talk about Joe Burrow's incredible game-winning drive and really game-winning, just game in general against the Tennessee Titans, winning 31-20. I want to talk about that later. Of course, the Cleveland Browns loss. I want to talk about the Chargers. I want to talk about Bears, Saints, Seattle, San Francisco. Of course, Dallas, Philadelphia. I want to get to every game, but I think the number one game, and I think a lot of people will agree with this, that people were kind of going into, besides maybe Pittsburgh, Baltimore as well. This is a matchup I want to see. This is must-see television, and that was Tua Tagovailoa's first career start. Now, I don't know what everybody was expecting going into the start, but I came away after Tua Tagovailoa's debut satisfied with what I saw. Now, it appears, I should say, that the national media is really harping on Tua. Again, Tua Tagovailoa, if you didn't watch the game and you just look at the stat line, I'm sure to the surface it does not look great. Again, Tua Tagovailoa, 93 yards for a 12 out of 22 with a touchdown, and he also lost that fumble. Again, you just look at that on the surface and you say, wow, I don't think the Dolphins would win that game if my quarterback played that way, right? But then you look at the final score. You see 28-17 Miami. Again, I'll talk about Miami and why I think Miami is a top 10 team in football right now, potentially a playoff team. I do want to talk about that in this segment as well. This segment will be dominated with Tua, but as well as some just Miami Dolphin talk as a whole. Again, that game was crazy. If you watched it, Jared Goff had produced 4 turnovers, should have been more. He fumbled twice through 2 interceptions. One of the fumble became a scoop and score all the way to the touchdown. One of the interceptions, which was it was the other fumble recovery by Kyle Van Noy, went all the way down to the 1-yard line, which then Tua handed it off to Gaskin for the 1-yard line. So Jared Goff really fumbled twice and pretty much threw 2 pick sixes. On top of that, special teams for Miami, Jakeem Grant returned a punt all the way to the end zone. So they got 3 scores, essentially, really 2 scores. So they got that fumble return for the touchdown and then the punt return for a touchdown as well. Then they got that other fumble that set them up on the 1-yard line. So they pretty much got 3 scores from their defense. And Tua really didn't see the field that much. I know a lot of people wanted to see Tua Tagovailoa come out there against the LA Rams and do what we've seen Justin Herbert be doing. I'll talk about him later on the show. And Joe Burrow, what we've seen Joe Burrow be doing as well. We wanted to see Tua Tagovailoa go out there in his first start, throw for 250 plus yards or 200 plus yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, smoke the Rams, all this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, the Miami Dolphins won the game. And that validated the switch from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Tua Tagovailoa. Now, I'll get into Tua's stats and his performance and why I think they should have been better than they were due to some drops and everything like that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But what was the main goal for Tua Tagovailoa in his first ever start? 1, win the game. I think that's everybody's number 1 priority when playing football, right? You want to win the game, especially the quarterback. I think the number 2 objective for Tua Tagovailoa in that game, for something that should be considered a success, in my opinion, his debut, walk out healthy, take a couple hits, right? And that's exactly what Tua did. Now, Tua Tagovailoa hasn't played football in almost a year. Again, people forget he had a completely traumatic hip injury that quite literally could have ended his entire football playing career. For him to go from that point just under a year ago to now starting halfway through the season for the Miami Dolphins, who again are in playoff contention, going against a top 5 defense in the NFL in the Los Angeles Rams, going against maybe the greatest, or at least one of the greatest defensive players of all time in Aaron Donald, again going against a team that went to the Super Bowl a little over 2 years ago now. The LA Rams are considered an elite team with an elite coach, right? They're in the thick of the playoff race as well. I think everybody could have agreed going into that game that people had the Rams over the Dolphins, as in the better team, the better roster, better coach even. And then when they leave with a huge win at home, with a playoff push, with the division in hand, potentially only a game back of Buffalo, or a game or 2, I think they're a game and a half back of Buffalo for the division. And all you needed to prove, in my opinion, was you can win with Tua Tagovailoa. Because all the national media was saying, oh my God, I don't know if Tua can bring Miami to the playoffs. Fitzpatrick was the guy to bring in the playoffs. Should have sat Tua for the whole year, or at least until Fitzpatrick was playing bad. Game 1, this Miami Dolphins team proved they can win even if Tua Tagovailoa isn't playing his best. How many teams with young quarterbacks can say that? If Justin Herbert for the Chargers doesn't ball out, do the Chargers win a game? They can't even win when he is balling out. So the answer for that is no. Can the Cincinnati Bengals win with Joe Burrow having a poor performance or a subpar performance? Absolutely not. Can Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks win without Russell Wilson showing out? No. Can the Arizona Cardinals win without Kyler Murray showing out? No. Can the Dallas Cowboys win without Dak Prescott? No. Can the Philadelphia Eagles win without Carson Wentz balling out and trying to save them? No. All of these teams with these great young quarterbacks can't win unless that quarterback steps up and wins. The amount of pressure that's on Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, a Dak Prescott, a Russell Wilson, a Kyler Murray, a Carson Wentz, that pressure isn't on Tua Tagovailoa because Brian Flores, the coach, and this Miami Dolphins defense has proven they can win games for the Miami Dolphins and not just win games against the Jets or against San Francisco like they've done the last 2 weeks or against Jacksonville. They can win games at home against the Los Angeles Rams who were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Folks, this Miami Dolphins team is legit, and Tua Tagovailoa was only going to get better. In my opinion, once the Miami Dolphins won the game, that validated the decision. We can win with Tua Tagovailoa. We can win big games with Tua Tagovailoa. We can beat good teams with Tua Tagovailoa. Again, he was his first start, and over his first, and again, with no preseason because of COVID, this was Tua's first live-action football game in over 300 days. What did people expect? And again, Tua Tagovailoa did not even play that bad. Yes, you see 12 of 22 and you think, oh, where's the accuracy? And you see only the 93 yards. He threw a touchdown, which was nice. I'll get to that in a minute. Tua Tagovailoa, for just some context, if you didn't watch the game, if you just watched Red Zone, sure, it looks like Tua didn't do great or his defense bailed him out and he didn't have to be great. Folks, 3 drops at least on third down. Tua Tagovailoa had at least 4 to 5 drops I saw during the entire game. One of them was a jump ball to Mike Gesicki, which you could argue isn't necessarily a drop, but you can count it as a drop. There were 4 passes that I think were catchable or should have been caught that happened on third down. 4 drives stalled for the Miami Dolphins because of drop passes. That's a lot left on the field for Tua Tagovailoa. If those balls are caught, we're looking at what? 16 of 22? For more like 120, 130 yards. And that's minimum. If those drives continue, Tua could go down the field and lead the Dolphins to a touchdown. He could go out there and throw for the 250 yards and 3 touchdowns that we all wanted to see. But those drives stalled, not because of him, because of the receivers. And maybe he needs to get better chemistry with the receivers. Maybe the receivers aren't used to, the ball rotating and spinning differently because he's a left-handed quarterback. All that will come with time. But again, for him to do that in his first ever start, right? Look efficient, look accurate, look mobile. Took a huge hit from Aaron Donald, responding after that fumble. Again, after that fumble from Tua Tagovailoa, right, which led to a Robert Woods touchdown, Tua immediately responded with throwing his first career touchdown pass to Devontae Parker with, by the way, the lowest percent of separation in the NFL all season. No one has thrown the tightest window throw that has been made for a touchdown this NFL season came from Tua Tagovailoa. Isn't that what we saw at Alabama? Tight window throws, anticipation, perfect accuracy, perfect ball placement. All 4 of those things I saw in that Miami Dolphin game. I saw the accuracy. I saw the mobility. I saw the ball placement on a couple of throws to Preston Williams and one to Jakeem Grant where he went through all of his progressions and found him on the comeback even though he was covered. I saw him throwing guys open. One of those drops, which was Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki was completely covered on the play. Tua Tagovailoa threw him open and gave him a chance to make a play, and he almost did. Same with that Jakeem Grant route. Same with the Devontae Parker touchdown. Devontae Parker was literally being fouled, right? It was pass interference. He had a guy around his neck, and Tua Tagovailoa still, as Devontae Parker was falling down with the guy on his neck, put the ball in a perfect spot, and it still led to a touchdown. The penalty was declined, folks. We saw from Tua Tagovailoa what he could be in the future. And if this, right, 12 of 22, which really should have been 16 of 22, right? If you don't count the drops, Tua Tagovailoa at worst, right, if those guys catch the ball, goes 16 of 22 for 130-ish yards, right? If you're telling me Tua Tagovailoa on his worst day, goes 16 of 22 for 130 yards and fumbled the ball on a huge hit from Aaron Donald. You wouldn't take that on your quarterback's worst day against a top 5 defense in the league in his first ever start, in his first live action football where he could be hit in over 300 days. People won't take that? People are calling him a bust. People are saying he looked too small. He looked too little. He didn't look little at all. I don't understand the argument. I think it was somebody, I think it might have been Colin Cowherd, who said Tua looked small. He looked frail. Why? Because he went against Aaron Donald? And Aaron Donald decked him? Doesn't Aaron Donald deck everybody? I thought Aaron Donald was the next Lawrence Taylor. I thought Aaron Donald was the guy who's, killing Josh Allen and throwing him around and throwing Patrick Mahomes around, right? And we're saying Tua looked too small because he fumbled from an Aaron Donald sack? You know how many guys do that? Every single week he forces to play like that. The overreactions on Tua were incredible and were outstanding in my opinion. Again, he did not wow you. He didn't have to. His team was up 28-7, 28-10 at halftime. They were up 28-7 at a certain point. The game was over at half, folks. Jared Goff turned the ball over 4 times. Should have thrown 2 more picks, one to Eric Rowe, or should have thrown 3 more picks, one to Andrew Van Ginkel, one to Eric Rowe, and one to Xavier Howard. All 3 of those guys dropped passes. Jared Goff really should have thrown 5 interceptions and fumbled twice. The game should have been even more of a blowout. And again, you're asking Tua Tagovailoa to overcome 4 third-down drops? No quarterback can overcome that, folks. Like, come on. And the fact that the Miami Dolphins won the game is enough. Enough. When a team wins the game, it's a winning week, period, point blank. You take it, we'll see what Tua Tagovailoa can do. And now we look at the remaining schedule. Next Sunday, I don't know if Tua's going to win his second career game against a team that's coming off a bye, of course, in the Arizona Cardinals. But we get Tua versus Kyler Murray. If Tua Tagovailoa did that, anticipation, timing, accuracy, great throws, tightest window throw for a touchdown in the NFL this season against a top 5 defense in his first career start, Tua Tagovailoa. What do you think he's going to do against the Jets when he faces them later in the year? When he faces the Bengals later in the year? When he faces the choking Chargers later in the year? When he faces the Broncos who are struggling right now later on in the year? When he faces the Raiders who are up and down later in the year? When he faces the Patriots who might be tanking now or rebuilding later on in the year? When he faces the Cardinals this Sunday, they don't have a great defense, folks. Tua Tagovailoa is only going to get better and better every week. And yes, eventually he will put up the numbers that Burrow and Herbert are doing, but give him time. Be patient, folks. First live action football in over 300 days. First start in over 300 days. No preseason, no real snaps besides those 2 bogus snaps in the Jets game. And all Tua Tagovailoa did was go out there, look healthy, respond after he fumbled, threw with anticipation, accuracy, on the money, and won the freaking football game. Expectations, folks, should not be that high. Right? Again, if they lost the game, you can come at Tua Tagovailoa. Whoa, they got blown out, and he only threw 93 yards in a blowout. Sure, come at him for his play. But when you win the game, folks, unless the quarterback throws 4 picks, right, and really inhibited it, right, Tua Tagovailoa did not hold this Miami Dolphin team back on Sunday. In fact, I think he propelled them forward. I think he energized the organization. I think he energized the defense. Not that it needed energizing or anything like that. He energized the fans. And for once, the Miami Dolphins are relevant. And for once, a show like mine or like the GSMC Sports Podcast that I'm doing right now or like ESPN is leading off with Tua Tagovailoa as their number 1 topic. When have the Dolphins been able to say that, folks? They're relevant. They're good. They're 4-3. I think they have the second best defense in football. They're the number 1 scoring defense in the league, which in my opinion is the most important stat for a defense, just because, again, allowing points. They're number 1 in that. The only defense right now I would say that is better than the Miami Dolphins right now is Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh, hand in hand, is a better defense than Miami, but Miami is the second best defense in the league right now. It is at least top 5. You know how huge that is for a rookie quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa? Absolutely incredible. In my opinion, right now, Miami is a top 10 team. Brian Flores deserves votes for Coach of the Year. I don't think he should win it. I think I would give that to Mike Tomlin. I'll talk about that in my 3rd segment. I think, he's a great coach. Don't get me wrong. I think we need to talk about Brian Flores as Coach of the Year, potentially. I think he's a top 3 coach this season, just top 3 coaching job this season. I'm not saying he's a top 3 coach in the NFL. I'm saying top 3 coaching job so far this season. I think number 1 would definitely go to Mike Tomlin. I think he's done the best coaching job. And number 2, is there a better feel-good story? Is there more of a surprise record right now than Miami being 4-3? Ahead of New England, a game and a half out of the division championship spot in the AFC East, a half a game back from the 7th seed right now, a half a game back behind Cleveland for the playoff spot. Are you going to be surprised if Miami makes the playoffs? I'm not. I think they're a better team than Cleveland. I think they're a better team than Indianapolis. Again, we got to put some more respect in this Miami Dolphin team, and this team is only going to get better. Their schedule gets easier to his life. Gets easier week after week, folks. Eventually, he'll put up the 300 yards that Herbert does. Eventually, he'll win, do these game-winning, outstanding run and throws that we see Joe Burrow does. Give him time to develop. Talk to me after his 3rd, 4th game of the year when he's going against the Jets and the Bengals and the Chargers. Then we'll see what Tua Tagovailoa is really about, and I cannot wait to see it. Again, this to me validated Brian Flores as a coach, validated this Dolphin defense, validated this Dolphin team, and more importantly, validated the decision that Tua Tagovailoa was the right choice to start this week, and that Tua Tagovailoa is at least going to work from a health standpoint in the NFL. He looked healthy, took a couple big hits, bounced right back up, wasn't limping, wasn't holding the hip. He ran for 2 yards at a certain point, rolled out a ton of design rollout plays. They have faith that he's healthy and he can move, folks. That's all we're looking for at this point for Tua Tagovailoa. Let him develop. Let him get his sea legs under him. Let him get some NFL experience. Watch this Miami Dolphin team take off. That's my personal opinion on the Dolphins. Let me know what you think of the Miami Dolphins this year. Do you agree with me? Are they a top 10 team right now? Is Brian Flores a top 10 coach? And is a Miami Dolphin defense a top 3 defense in football? Let me know what you guys think about all that good stuff. All right, we're going to take a short break. On the other side of the break, I want to get to every other NFL game, hopefully. Later on the show, again, don't forget at the very end of the show, I am going to be giving you some rumors about Giannis Antetokounmpo potentially getting traded to the Miami Heat, not even signing there in free agency. Maybe Giannis is on the move to Golden State or Miami or Toronto sooner rather than later, as well as James Harden potentially to Philadelphia. That's coming on at the end of the show. And in my third segment, I want to give you my halfway through the season awards show. So pretty much through 8 weeks of the year, I want to give you my coach of the year, my rookie of the year, both offense and defense, my offensive and defensive player of the year, as well as coach of the year, executive of the year, and MVP. I want to give you all those awards. That's coming in the third segment. But right after this short break, I want to talk about as many NFL storylines as I can, including the NFC least and a couple of other games as well. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, and again, continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, if you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking about Tua Tagovailoa's debut for the Miami Dolphins and why I think the Miami Dolphins are potentially a playoff team this year and potentially a top 10 team in football right now due to their defense. This NFL year is so weird. I think there are a lot of good teams. I don't know if there's a lot of great teams. I think there are a few of them. I think there's a lot of teams that I think I could give you a top 4 right now. I think Kansas City's legit. I think Baltimore's legit. I think Kansas City's legit. I think Pittsburgh's legit. I want to say that Seattle's legit, but sometimes I find inconsistencies in their defense. But I think Seattle is legit once they get Jamal Adams back. Again, those are the 3 teams right now that I'm looking at as real legitimate teams. I thought Tennessee was that. I'm not so sure anymore. But Pittsburgh, Seattle, and Kansas City, I think, are sure fire contenders. After that, you can really argue that anybody can beat anybody. Are you telling me right now that, the Dolphins couldn't beat Tennessee, that, the Dolphins couldn't beat Buffalo, that, Indianapolis couldn't beat Green Bay? There's just so many of these matchups that I think a lot of these teams are good, not great. And I think there's a lot of teams that are bad this year as well. Teams like the Jets. There's a lot of teams looking for a quarterback this year and a really, really good quarterback class. So there's a lot of teams that are going to be bad this year. But I think just because of that extra playoff spot, it's so close now. A lot of teams are 4-3, right? Where do you stack up with Miami versus a team like Indy or a team like Las Vegas, right? It's gonna come down to the wire. It's gonna be close. So I think Miami is a top 10 team right now. And I'm not saying that, I don't know if the term top 10 team means what a lot of people think it means, is what I'm trying to say here. Now I want to transition here to the rest of the NFL. So in my next segment, I'm going to be doing my way too early, or if you want to say way too early, but mid-season awards point, right? Who's the MVP right now? Who's all of these things, right? That's in my next segment. But for this segment, I want to try to talk about as many NFL games as I can, and I'll stretch it into next segment if I have to. I want to start off, though, with the NFC East, and there's 2 sides of this coin, right? The Giants and the Eagles, and the Cowboys, right? If you want to say a third side of this coin. In my opinion, the NFC East is a 2-team race, right? And it's not the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are toast. I think the Cowboys are done. I think their season has been over. I think it ended last week. I mean, if you needed any more confirmation, they lose to the Eagles 23-9. Again, I do want to talk about the Giants. I'll talk about the Eagles first. Again, I mean, Ben DiNucci is starting. What can you expect? 180 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Zeke didn't do enough to win the football game, man, and he's the offense. With no quarterback right now, they might go Cooper Rush, apparently. There's another practice squad guy, I'm blanking on his name, that they might go to, too. He might be the starter. Cowboys don't know who to play right now at quarterback, right? I think they should have been sellers at the deadline. They're not. I think they're just going to try to run it back with the same roster next year. Wouldn't surprise me if Mike McCarthy's a one and done. Wouldn't surprise me if they keep him because of the excuse of we didn't have our quarterback, yada, yada, this. Don't forget, the Cowboys weren't very good when Dak Prescott was playing, right? They weren't winning a ton of games. They weren't on pace to, go 10-6 even, right? The division was very much up for grabs. Now, if Dak plays, do I think the Cowboys win this division? Maybe. I'd probably say they're the favorites. So again, Dak plays a huge role, but again, he's not everything, right? Again, this is a two-team race. I'm done talking about the Cowboys. They're irrelevant and they are not good, folks. I don't want to spend time talking about the Cowboys. I know that, Dallas is always the head, but this year it's a lost year, folks. They're done. It's over. I want to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles because everybody is getting on Carson Wentz, right? Oh my God, Carson Wentz has regressed, including myself. I said, right, Carson Wentz at the beginning of the year looked like he doesn't know how to play football, right? And folks, I've had an epiphany about Carson Wentz. I don't know how many quarterbacks could do what Carson Wentz is doing, like with the receiving core he has, right? No Alshon Jeffrey, no Deshaun Jackson, no Zach Ertz, no Miles Sanders, completely battered offensive line, defense that's been regressing for years. How many quarterbacks can overcome that and win a division, folks? Brady? Maybe. I don't know. I don't even know if Brady could at this point, right? I'd probably put Brady, Mahomes, it's so tough, but I don't think Lamar could. I don't know if you put certain quarterbacks on this Philadelphia roster, right? If you put Lamar Jackson on this Philadelphia roster, right? Is their record improved? I don't think it is. If you put, Big Ben on this roster, you think it's improved? No. I don't know if there's a lot of quarterbacks that can do what Carson Wentz is doing. Does he turn the ball over too much? Yes. But what my pro comparison for Carson Wentz has always been the same. It's always been Brett Favre. He makes a lot of mistakes, but he makes a lot of big plays, and boy, is he clutch. And that's what Carson Wentz is, folks. He's winning the Eagles games with Travis Fulgham as the number one receiver. How many quarterbacks in this league can make Travis Fulgham, right, or Fulgham, whatever his last name is, right? How many quarterbacks in this league can make Travis Fulgham a top 5 receiver in football? Because the last month, he has statistically been a top 5 receiver in football. Travis Fulgham is the same guy who was cut by the Green Bay Packers earlier this year. Yes, the same Green Bay Packers who haven't gotten Aaron Rodgers a receiver in years. I'll talk about them at a certain point too, right? Green Bay, who I think we can all agree on, almost traded for Will Fuller today, needs a receiver, right? Travis Fulgham couldn't even make that roster. And Carson Wentz is making him a top 5 receiver in the league the last month. Folks, Carson Wentz is great. Carson Wentz is the best QB in this division, right? And I don't want to talk about Dak when he's injured. I'm not even going to mention. I'm not going to get in this debate again. I've done it too many times, folks. But stop. If you're an Eagles fan and you're calling for Jalen Hurts, or if you're calling for them to tank and draft a quarterback, right? Carson Wentz is the only reason Philadelphia has a win this year, folks. Period. They're 3-4-1. Okay? What was the objective, folks? Again, the stats in the game. Who led them in receiving, right? You go for rushing, you had Miles Sanders who returned, right, with 95 yards. Fine. Good run game. That's the only thing Carson Wentz is going for him, right? Receiving. You want to know who the leading receiver was, right, for the Philadelphia Eagles? In this game against the Dallas Cowboys, right? Besides Fulgham, Jalen Reagor, 16 yards. Dallas Goedert, 15 yards. Greg Ward, Boston Scott in the backfield again. No Miles Sanders, right? Komet, right? Carson Wentz rushing for 17 yards. Folks, he's got nothing to work with. And he won another division game against the Dallas Cowboys, who already, despite the fact that there's no Dak, I don't think anybody can argue Dallas has a better roster than Philadelphia from an offensive standpoint. If you switched right now, right? I mean, Dak / DiNucci / whatever. If Carson Wentz was the current quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, they would be a top 2-3 seed in the NFC. I think they'd probably be 4-3, 5-2 maybe, probably 5-2. If the Dallas Cowboys have Carson Wentz, they're 5-2, and their offense looks like a top 3 offense in football. That's the power of Carson Wentz, folks. Stop. Stop going for his head, asking, why aren't we trading Carson Wentz? He's not the answer. He's regressed ever since the Super Bowl. Folks, he throws a lot of picks because he's trying to win games, because his defense can't stop anybody, and his offensive line can't block anybody, and his receivers can't get open, so he has to throw contested throws into double coverage because nobody can get separation and get open. That's why he throws so many picks. They're not bad throws. He's trying to throw a guy open, and he can't because his receivers are Greg Ward and Travis Fulgham. When are the expectations for Carson Wentz to save the franchise? That's what he's doing, right? He's saving the franchise and somehow getting wins and finding ways to win, even though he shouldn't, because he usually has the worst receiving core out of the two teams playing, and the worst offensive line of the two teams playing, and the worst defense of the two teams playing. And all he's doing is finding ways to win, him and Doug Peterson, folks. Stop. The expectation is too high on Carson Wentz. Now, I want to transition now to the other team and the NFC. And then hopefully next segment I can talk about after my awards, some of the other teams. We're running out of time here. I'm spending a lot of time on these teams because I think it's important, right? I think this is the real storylines of the NFL. The New York Giants have a brighter future than the New York Jets. I said it, right? Folks, I understand that the Jets are going to draft Trevor Lawrence. And again, I went all over the last episode that I did, right? Talking about how good Trevor Lawrence is. And don't get me wrong, Trevor Lawrence is quite literally the best quarterback prospect of my lifetime and maybe ever. But boy, do the Giants look better every week? I mean, every week the Giants, yes, they're losing. They are 1-6, but every single week the Giants games get closer and closer. They've lost the last 4 games, I think, by 8-3-1-2. I think it was 8-3-1-2 are the last 4 results of losses for the New York Giants. Right? Joe Judge looks like he can coach, folks. And I'm not going to lie to you. You know who Joe Judge reminds me of? Seriously, he reminds me of Brian Flores. That's what I think. I just ranted and raved about Brian Flores. I think the national media right now is ranting and raving about Brian Flores. How good this defense is, and how Brian Flores might be the only Belichick disciple to work. There's another Belichick disciple that nobody talks about. Joe Judge, special teams coordinator for New England, becomes the head coach of the New York Giants. Adds Jason Garrett as an offensive coordinator. Adds the former Dolphins, the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins last year, who was pretty good, pretty good Dolphin defense last year, became the DC of the Giants this year. And they just went toe-to-toe with Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? And I understand everyone's like, oh, well, Tampa was looking ahead to New Orleans, and they were. Tampa was looking ahead to New Orleans. They knew where they're going to win the game, even if they played poorly. But the fact that it was a close game is good enough for the Giants this year, folks, with no Saquon. They're still rebuilding this offensive line and defense. Jabril Peppers looks like a real player. Martinez looks like a guy you can keep as a captain, as a linebacker for years and years to come, right? Daniel Jones, I'm split on. I know you can keep Saquon. I know Slayton looks good, right? I know Shepard looks good. I think they should give Golden Tate the ball more. I think Ingram looks pretty good, folks. I hate to say this. I think the Giants could win this division. I think it's them or Philadelphia, depending on Daniel Jones' play, is if they should draft a quarterback or not. Because Daniel Jones, I think, is either the reason they're going to win or they're not going to win this division. Because I think the Giants have the coaching staff to win the NFC East this year. Jason Garrett got too much heat in Dallas, and I think we know that now. The play calling has been outstanding for New York, despite no Saquon Barkley. Can you imagine this Giants coaching staff next year with Justin Fields and Saquon Barkley healthy? I think the Giants would win the division as soon as next year. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to bet money or anything that the Giants would win this division. I'd still say Philadelphia right now. But if Daniel Jones can somehow just turn it on and stop turning the ball over, man. Some of those interceptions are just balls you need to throw away. If he would just learn that, he would have had 2 touchdowns, no picks, and the Giants win yesterday, folks, because of turnovers. Again, I think if you win the division, I think you keep Daniel Jones. If you don't win the division, I think you look at Justin Fields. I think there's no in between. I really don't think there is. But if Daniel Jones plays good enough to keep his job next year, that means you win the division. I think that's how the expectation should be for Daniel Jones now. Because again, it's a make or miss league, folks, and you need a quarterback in this league. And if you don't have it, you're not going to win anything. So if you don't win the division, when this is quite literally the worst division in NFL history, I don't think there should be any excuses for the New York Giants to not win this. They have a good receiving core. They have a decent line, right? The offensive line isn't great, but it's not. I don't think it's horrible. When I watched it last night, I don't think, oh my God, it's horrible, right? They have a couple backs, right? Deion Lewis made some plays. They have Devontae Freeman. He made some plays. Evan Ingram's a good tight end. This defense is improving every single week. I think they got a good coaching staff. I would take right now. I take New York Giants coaching staff over Mike McCarthy and that Dallas Cowboy coaching staff. I would, wouldn't you? They get better every single week. They respond to criticism. They respond to playing good opponents. They play up to the level of their competition, not down. And this team is rebuilding. They remind me of the Dolphins last year. They remind me of Brian Flores last year. That's just how I view it with the New York Giants and the whole Daniel Jones situation. Who would you do if let's say you're the number 2 overall pick. Your team got better every single week. You just didn't win a lot of games. Let's say you go 3-13. You have the 2nd, 3rd, 4th pick, right? And Daniel Jones, did he do enough to win you the division? No. but he kept you in some games, like in the Tampa Bay game. What would you do if you were Dave Gettleman, GM of the New York Giants? Would you move off Daniel Jones if you have a top 3 pick or not? I think if I had a top 3 pick, I would move off him. But if I can't get Lawrence or Fields, I think I'd actually hang on to him. I think he's shown enough, some bright spots from Daniel Jones. That big-time throw to Golden Tate, folks, that's a big-time NFL throw in a big-time NFL game. The picks I hate, but if he can just work on it, if he can just fix a little bit, I think it'd be good. And I think the Giants might have a quarterback of the future. I don't know. Jury's still out on Daniel Jones, but I know what the Giants do have, and they have a coach. They have a coaching staff that if they can retain everybody going to next year, if Jason Garrett doesn't get scooped, I'm telling you right now, maybe the best coaching staff, maybe not this year, maybe next year or the year after, the Giants will eventually, I think, have the best coaching staff in that division. They just need to get the best quarterback in that division, and then they could be running it for a really, really long time. All right, we're going to take another short break. On the other side of this break, I want to talk about a couple more NFL games, and then hopefully at the end of the segment, if we still have time, I do want to do those way too early NFL awards. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you all, each of you. I just finished talking about a little bit the NFC East, which I think the two most interesting division races I think that there are, besides I think the NFC West, are the AFC East and the NFC East. I think they're fascinating. I think it's going to come down to the Eagles and the Giants in the NFC East, and I think it's going to come down to the Dolphins and the Bills in the AFC East. The NFC West is a little bit more tricky. I want to say it's going to come down to, I think Seattle's going to win it. I think Arizona's got a chance. I'm not so sure though. All right, now I want to transition quickly here to a couple more NFL games before I get into my top 10, or not my top 10, excuse me, my award predictions so far for the NFL. I will get into all that good stuff as well at the end of this segment, but I do want to start off quickly here with some of the other games. I'll just give my quick reaction like I usually do, and then I'll get into the nitty and gritty and get into that list that I want to give you guys. First off, the Steelers and Ravens game. The Ravens outgained them. The reason why the Baltimore Ravens lost is because of Lamar Jackson. And I think we have to start having a serious conversation, something I have mentioned before, that Lamar Jackson might not be as good as he was last year. That maybe last year he caught a lot of people off guard, there wasn't a lot of tape on him, and now that people realize that as long as you force Lamar Jackson to throw, he struggles. And that is something that's been going on since college. We know that Lamar Jackson has struggled with throwing the football. I think a lot of people maybe got a little bit too excited with his throwing stats last year, and how he was doing last year, just in general. And I don't think they realize that a lot of good coaches on the defensive side of the ball in the NFL. And at this level, once you give these coaches, guys like Belichick, guys like Mike Tomlin, guys like Brian Flores, this amount of tape on you, the people are going to start figuring you out a little bit. And I think some parts of the league, I think the elite teams have figured out Lamar Jackson. The teams with elite coaching staffs have figured out Lamar Jackson. And again, Lamar throws too many picks. I think he's got a weird throwing motion. I think he kind of sidearm slings it. I don't think he has the ability to really zip it in. as in just like throw with that, when you watch Justin Herbert, right? Justin Herbert's a great example of this. Carson Wentz is too. The zip that they put on the ball to fit into those tight windows, I don't think Lamar Jackson can do. I think Lamar Jackson is really, really good at easy throws. And I think a lot of quarterbacks can make those easy throws. And I think the difference between Lamar Jackson being an average quarterback in this league and an MVP candidate is his running ability. And if you take that running ability away, when you take that running ability away from Lamar Jackson, as we saw what the Steelers do, Lamar Jackson kind of turns into no better than Ryan Tannehill, no better than guys like Burrow and Carson Wentz. He's just no better as a throwing of a football, right? So I think once you get to that level, there's ways to beat Lamar Jackson, which is why I don't know if I have them as a Super Bowl team anymore. And also, I don't think Lamar Jackson's won a single big game since entering the NFL. Now, don't get me wrong, this is only his second full year starting. He doesn't necessarily need to win all these big games just yet, but I think it's something worth mentioning that Lamar Jackson, I feel like in every single big game for the division, when the Steelers are actually stacked and have their quarterback in, right, and all that good stuff, he just hasn't been able to get it done, and he hasn't been winning those big games. Obviously, we saw it in Tennessee. We saw it in some of the other stuff, too. It's going to be tough for Lamar Jackson when these defensive coordinators take away the running ability to win those football games, to beat Tennessee in the playoffs, to beat Pittsburgh in the playoffs, to beat Kansas City in the playoffs. He's got to have to find a way out of it, because as his career is going to go on and on and on, he's only going to get worse. And then we get into a situation of, did Lamar Jackson peak last year? And I don't want that for Lamar Jackson. I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan. I think he's must-see television, but that's a realistic outcome for Lamar Jackson's career if he does not improve as a thrower. And I think that Pittsburgh game only validated that point and showed that, hey, once a defensive coordinator, even when Lamar Jackson's strength is playing with the lead, right? It's always been playing with the lead. He hasn't been able to come back from behind. Everyone has mentioned it. It's not just me who said that the Ravens can't come from behind. The Ravens were leading this game, and they blew the lead because Lamar Jackson couldn't throw the football. And more often than not, he is not an elite thrower of the football. And that's a problem if you're Baltimore. You need to figure that out, because the running around and making the great plays will only get you so far. Eventually, you're going to have to throw the football as a quarterback. I'm not saying Lamar Jackson is a horrible thrower of the football, right? But 13 of 28, 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 4 sacks. It's not good enough to win a Super Bowl, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not good enough to be a top 5 team in football. Lamar Jackson, playing at this level, makes the Ravens a top 5 team in the league. But if you want to win Super Bowls and be an all-time great, you gotta step it up with the throwing game. And I think that's what's happening with Lamar Jackson right now. On the side note, the Green Bay Packers, they lose to the Vikings 28-22, and immediately what I thought was, wow, Green Bay's defense is bad. They can't stop the run for anything, and they need to get a receiver. What did Green Bay do to address both of those things in the trading deadline? Absolutely nothing. They did not make a single trade. They did not get a wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers, and they did not get a single defensive player for Aaron Rodgers' defense. In fact, the only thing that happened to the Green Bay Packers after that game was their entire running back room appears that it will not be able to play on Thursday. Folks, Green Bay has always been about Aaron Rodgers, and I like Matt LaFleur as a head coach. But I think something we need to talk about with Aaron when his career is all said and done, we talk about Brady, and we talk about Marino, we talk about all these all-time greats. We need context. And one of the things that needs to be, chapter 1, you could say, of context in, for Aaron Rodgers' story is Green Bay never, ever, ever spent money to get him a defense or get him a receiver. The one time they did it was the year they won the Super Bowl, and since then, they just haven't done it, and I'm worried Aaron Rodgers might never, ever win another Super Bowl, at least in Green Bay, because of it. But what it does help the case for is Aaron going to L.A., or going to San Francisco, or going to Green Bay, or something like that, leaving Green Bay, I should say. Speaking of San Francisco, they lose again. This time the Seattle game was a little bit closer. Now the injuries are everywhere. Kittle and Garoppolo could be out for the year. I'm going to say what a lot of other people have been saying. I would move off of Jimmy Garoppolo if I was San Francisco. 2 options I see for San Francisco next year. 1, Aaron Rodgers. I talked about at the beginning of the year of the football season that Aaron could potentially be leaving Green Bay as soon as after this year. After the Jordan Love draft pick, they know Jordan Love's the future. They might want to go with him as soon as next year. You don't draft the guy in the first round to have him sit for 4 years and then pay him before he's even taken a snap, right? That's not what Green Bay's going to do. At the latest, at the end of next season is when we're going to see Jordan Love, right? Jordan Love could start for the Packers as soon as next season. Would not surprise me. Aaron's always wanted to be a 49er. He's from the San Francisco area. Jimmy Garoppolo is holding the San Francisco team back. Kyle Shanahan's a good coach. They have good weapons. They have a good offensive line. They have a good defense when they're healthy, and they have probably the league's best tight end when Kittle's healthy as well. Give that to Aaron Rodgers. The San Francisco 49ers would win the Super Bowl the following year. Option number 2 I would go after, I would draft a guy and then also trade for Matt Ryan is what I would do. Kyle Shanahan has been to a Super Bowl with Matt Ryan. Reunite those two. Best defense that Matt Ryan would ever play with, probably. Not the best receiving core in the world in comparison to the Atlanta Falcons one they have, but Matt Ryan would still make it work. And then I'd go after a guy like Trey Lance. Wilson out of BYU is another quarterback prospect that a lot of people are talking about recently. Both of those things should be options for San Francisco going forward. And the final thing I want to talk about is that Bengals-Titans game. What a game that was. Joe Burrow, folks, is my Rookie of the Year. I'll talk about it in my next segment, or in a little bit here. I don't want to give any spoilers yet, but Joe Burrow should win Rookie of the Year. Folks, what he's doing, man, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 26 of 37, 249 yards against a good defense, folks. Joe Burrow's doing some special stuff that I don't know some other guys are doing. I will leave it at that. And I think if they watch Joe Brady, with how good this Carolina offense looks, watch Joe Brady be the Cincinnati Bengals head coach next season and watch them get a good offensive line and a good defense and watch the Bengals be really, really competitive for a long time. They definitely have their quarterback. Burrow's absolutely incredible. All right, now I want to transition now for the next few minutes or so into that list that I was telling you guys about. MVP, Coach of the Year, my way too early NFL awards. Let's just get right into it, with the first award being Coach of the Year. Now, there are 2 candidates that I think should be really considered for this job. 3, really. Here's the 3. 4 maybe. If the Arizona Cardinals win the division, I think Cliff Kingsbury should win Coach of the Year, but I don't think they're going to win the division, right? So here's the 3 candidates, from 3 to 1. Third place for me would be Pete Carroll. I think Seattle's probably going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC, probably represent them in the Super Bowl. The only reason why I don't see it going to Pete Carroll is I think a lot of people are going to give more credit to Russell Wilson, who I will obviously mention on this list, more than Pete Carroll. So I think Pete Carroll's number 3. Number 2, Brian Flores. I think there's a real chance the Dolphins squeak into the playoffs. I think there's a real chance that they potentially win this division. Brian Flores in year 2 of this rebuild with 2 different quarterbacks playing. If he won that division, I think he would get some serious votes for Coach of the Year, specifically if he also coached up a top 5 defense in the league, which is what they are right now. Then after that, I think the winner of Coach of the Year this year will be Mike Tomlin. I don't remember if he won it last year. I think it might have been Mike Vrabel. I don't exactly remember. Either way, I think Mike Tomlin deserves to win it this year. To barely miss the playoffs last year with Duck Hodges and all those guys playing quarterback for you, and then as soon as you get just some resemblance of Big Ben, who hasn't even been that great this year, you're 7-0, the final remaining undefeated team. I don't think they'll go 16-0 or anything like that. They'll eventually lose. Either way, I think Mike Tomlin has proven himself time and time and again as a top 5 coach in this league. I think he deserves Coach of the Year. I think it will go to Mike Tomlin. Personally, that's just how I see it going. Next up, we have Defensive Rookie of the Year. Now, there's a lot of names on this list. Patrick Queen, Chase Young. I have Antoine Winfield Jr. winning this one. He's been the best, one of the best, at least box-to-box safeties in the entire league this year. One of the best tacklers in the league this year as well. On top of all that, he's producing turnovers for Tampa Bay. I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. That's just how I see it playing out, specifically with how good he's been from a tackling standpoint, from a turnover standpoint. He obviously made the big play in that Giants game to stop the 2-point conversion. Just a lot of big moments on a good football team for Antoine Winfield Jr. I think he deserves Defensive Rookie of the Year, specifically if Tampa Bay does make a deep playoff run. He'll be making those, big-time plays, not only in, he'll make those big time plays not only in the regular season, but in big games, in those playoff moments. And that's why I really do believe that Antoine Winfield will eventually win that Defensive Rookie of the Year award. Now let's get into Offensive Rookie of the Year. There's a couple candidates here. Dark horse for me is Tua Tagovailoa. If Tua Tagovailoa, I don't think he will win it, but if he does lead this Dolphins team to the playoffs and he plays at the same level as Burrow and Herbert, I think he deserves it. If he plays at that level or better and has the better record, I would defer that for Tua to be the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Again, I don't think that will happen, which is why I have him being the dark horse. He's not even in top 3 for me, but as a dark horse candidate, Tua Tagovailoa, keep an eye on that whole situation with Miami and everything, and his statistics and everything like that, and how many wins they get. Number 3 will be Clyde Edwards-Helaire for me. He had a really, really good start to the season. The award's always going to go to a quarterback, in my opinion, or at least unless someone makes it like a really special year like Odell Beckham Jr. had. And on top of that, the quarterbacks go, have a poor year. At the end of the day, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be a really special back in this league and be a really, really great player for Kansas City. I just don't think he will win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Coming in at number 2 might be a surprise, folks. I have Herbert. I said it earlier on in the segment. I have Joe Burrow winning this Offensive Rookie of the Year in a close race over over Justin Herbert. I think Burrow's going to win more games at the end of the day. I don't know if he'll have a better record than the Chargers. I don't want to say win more games. I mean win more games for his team. Listen, here's the thing. Everybody loves Justin Herbert, and I'm loving what Justin Herbert's doing right now. He throws for all the yards and all the touchdowns. At the end of the day, he's hurting his team at end of games. He throws too many picks, too many jump balls sometimes, and he's a young quarterback. He's going to do that. He's going to make mistakes. But it's not just the defense's fault that they keep throwing 16-point leads. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow is having huge wins at home versus a Tennessee Titans team that might make the Super Bowl this year. I'm going to go with Joe Burrow. I think he's doing more with less than Justin Herbert is. All right, now let's get into Defensive Player of the Year. Now, there's a lot of different names you could throw out here for this one. I'm going to go Aaron Donald because he's been so dominant this year, as he's been every year. This is kind of a sort of a loser answer and just a cop-out answer here. There's a lot of guys you can, say deserve it, but I'm going to go with Aaron Donald. I think he will win Defensive Player of the Year. All right, then we're going to get into, obviously, Offensive Player of the Year. Now, I almost had Offensive Player of the Year be sort of the same, I don't want to say, the same guy. I don't think that'll happen this year. I think one guy will do more offensively than maybe some of the other guys get. Also, keep in mind, some other players you can keep in mind. I forgot to mention this. For Defensive Player of the Year, Aaron Donald, obviously, is who I have winning it. But Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. TJ Watt's another name. If the Steelers keep on rolling, TJ Watt can win it too. So just keep that in mind. But for Offensive Player of the Year, there's a couple names that I have in mind. Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones are really interesting to me. Alvin Kamara is really interesting to me as well. But don't be surprised if Kyler Murray wins it. I'm going to go with Kyler Murray here. I don't have Kyler Murray winning the MVP, so it would be weird that he would win Offensive Player of the Year, and I have MVP. He leads all quarterbacks in rush yards and rushing touchdowns. Dual threat is a really rewardable thing in the NFL today. I could see Kyler Murray getting it after he finishes, spoiler alert, second place in MVP voting. I think he'll finish second or third in MVP voting, but win Offensive Player of the Year. And of course, the final award is MVP. Coming in at third place for MVP this year, I think Tom Brady's going to be top 3 in the MVP voting. I don't think he's as dynamic and maybe as pop as he was in years past, as in like the highlights and the highlight throws and everything like that. Either way, Tampa Bay might be the best roster in the entire league, might be the best team in the entire league. Again, I have them. The 4 teams I think can win a championship are Seattle, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh. Those are the 4 teams right now that I'm confident could win a Super Bowl right now. A couple teams could get to it, but win it, I have those 4. You're the quarterback of one of those teams. I think he deserves a chance at MVP. Again, coming in at number 2, I have Kyler Murray finishing second place in the MVP voting. And of course, number 1, I have Seattle quarterback Russell Wilson. He's their entire team, folks. He's their entire offense. He runs around. He makes the plays. He's clutch. We've seen it time and time again. DK Metcalf is great. Tyler Lockett's great. They would not look as good without Russell Wilson. He is the reason why they are so good and why they're winning so many games. My opinion, he should win MVP. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this final break, I want to get into really, really quick for the next couple minutes or so, James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo rumors. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this final break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, if you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. Again, I want to transition here quickly to the NBA. I'm done talking about the NFL for today's episode. For quickly, just two rumors that I heard. The Athletic is reporting that the Philadelphia 76ers are going to go hard after James Harden. Now, Daryl Morey, obviously after stepping down as the general manager of the Houston Rockets, came over to Philadelphia to become their president, or at least either CEO or president of basketball operations. He's going to work alongside Elton Brand, who also got himself a nice extension. And this makes absolutely no sense for Philadelphia, in my opinion. It makes a lot of sense for Houston, who might want to go into a rebuilding mode with draft picks and completely reinvent themselves. But for Philadelphia, why would you want to pair James Harden with Joel Embiid? Two guys who have proven to shrink in the playoffs, two guys whose game I don't think would work very well, considering James Harden needs the ball a lot, and so does Joel Embiid. And I understand that some people can be like, well, Russell Westbrook and James Harden work. Not really. They're not winning a lot of games, and those guys kind of work because Russ is clearly worse than James Harden, and they're friends off the court. Joel Embiid and James Harden don't have a real connection, and I don't know if you can necessarily argue that James Harden deserves the ball more than a guy like Joel Embiid. So I don't know how that would necessarily work. But if I were Houston, if you could, trade James Harden for, a ton of picks and Ben Simmons and Matthias Thybulle, I would 100% do it. You have the shooters to surround Ben Simmons with, and if you reinvented your image as a team, maybe you get a big man again and you have Ben Simmons running the point and sort of passing the ball all around to shooters like Eric Gordon and some of these other guys you could potentially get via trade and in the draft. I think that would be better for Houston long term. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Philadelphia, but hey, wouldn't surprise me if Philadelphia were to pull it off. Again, it's been reported multiple times that Houston has said that James Harden is not available and they won't trade him and they want to win with James Harden and everything like that. But every guy has a price when it comes to trades in the world of sports, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's certainly an amount of draft picks and maybe players that you could get from Philadelphia that would make Houston want to say yes to that deal. Give them an offer they can't refuse per se. Now, the other rumor I heard quickly, and this will be the last thing I talk about, is about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, there's been a lot of Twitter reports saying that Giannis could potentially, again, take this with a grain of salt, be on the move sooner rather than later. Now, everybody knows he plays in Milwaukee, and there's rumors that he could leave in 2021 to a team like the Warriors or the Miami Heat. It's been reported that he's willing to sign a long-term extension with the Miami Heat as soon as now. So they're making it seem, again, it hasn't been exactly said like this, that Giannis is not necessarily opposed to being traded to Miami before he leaves, and that Milwaukee would rather trade him before, losing him for nothing. So I think if Milwaukee isn't confident enough that they could, re-sign him and bring him back, they could trade him as soon as this offseason. Again, this offseason is crazy with COVID and everything like that. With the lack of salary cap that's going to go down, the loss of revenue, teams aren't going to be able to pay as many guys as they like to. So maybe Milwaukee can pay Giannis, but they don't know if they can pay other guys or bring in more people like Chris Paul to help them win a championship. And if that's the case, Giannis is going to leave, you might as well trade him for something before nothing. And if you're the Miami Heat, you're willing to offer, again, the reports are they're willing to offer Hero, Nunn, and picks in return for Giannis. The only guys who are untouchable, of course, are Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Maybe you could also get Duncan Robinson. You can get a young guy, and Tyler Hero, I think, is a young star, potential superstar in this league for Giannis, and a bunch of picks. Better than getting rid of him for nothing. I could see that happening. I just don't know if Milwaukee's ready to pull the trigger and trade the two-time defending MVP. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on all social media platforms, and leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general. Again, those social media platforms are Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Don't forget to follow us on there as well. Again, please, please, please stay safe tonight, and do not forget to vote if you're listening to this on Tuesday. If you're listening to this a day or two after the election, just try to stay safe no matter what the outcome is. All right, again, that's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.